Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and I have something to show you. It is a thing called PurestDrive, and it's kind of a science project. For some years now, I've been working on how to get digital audio to pass through sound in such a way that it's as good as analog audio and doesn't ruin the tone, which is actually harder than you would think. And I've been pursuing a line of development recently that's sort of in the opposite of what most of the rest of the industry is doing, in that everybody's all about like oversampling and incredibly heavy-duty processing and stuff that just kills your computer completely. I wondered whether maybe there was advantages to, rather than doing that, simplifying things an incredible amount and turning to bit depth, basically increasing the amount of resolution that you have in the audio and maintaining it at all costs. Like I'm running what's called a long double internal mix bus. Now the audio unit format goes at what's called a 32-bit floating point. And my plugins have been running 64-bit floating point inside for some time, as well as all being 64-bit addressing and working with recent versions of digital audio workstations. But there's a level of fidelity beyond even 64-bit, which is called long double. That equates to about 80 bits. Now, this is a level of resolution way beyond what people normally consider to be even remotely useful. They'll tell you 32-bit is as good as anybody would possibly need already, and you certainly don't need 64-bit, much less, 80-bit, or I think actually on PowerPC it's even higher than 80-bit long double is. But enough talking about this. Why don't I start showing you something? I'll shut that off and get just a kick drum. This kick drum here. Now, what I thought I would do is illustrate some things about how these things normally work. I've pre-adjusted some of the logic distortions so that they'll give you an idea of what that kind of stuff sounds like. Here's this kick drum. It's carefully balanced out to be exactly peaking out as high as it can go. And if you give the logic overdrive to it, what you get is this. Sounds fairly similar. You can hear a little overtone on there. Now, if we switch over to what is called dist 2, what you get is this. Listen carefully. That's one where you can hear the difference that it's making. Now, there are reasons for throwing very small amounts of overdrive onto things, but PurestDrive is nothing but a simple overdrive. I'm demonstrating it all completely cranked out, but you can like go between dry and full crank, and it's a sophisticated way of doing that. But here is what you get when switching in PurestDrive. Now, it doesn't sound like it did anything, does it? That's the point. The point is that this is a completely transparent saturation. You don't hear the sound of it. I'll throw back in overdrive, for instance, and that changed the sound. And I can throw back in distortion 2 while we're at it. You can clearly hear what that did to the sound around the low end, and there's a whole artifact that gets added. But PurestDrive is the purest overdrive you can possibly have, and it sounds like this. Now you might ask, is that even doing anything? Well, I'll show you. 0.1, it took 1.4 dB off, and you didn't even hear it. But I can do more than that. Here we are back at the around 0.1. Note that this little peak level here is doing this. And we'll throw on PurestDrive, and then we'll throw on 2.3 dB of gain for a total of about, well, we're getting this much gain. Bada boom. Exactly the same tone, but a free nearly 2.5 dB of gain. I'll switch them back out. Switch in the drive. If you listen real closely, you can kind of hear that. Maybe. And then the gain. Now that's what PurestDrive is for. Now the reason that it is a $50 for-pay plugin is twofold. One is that I give people free updates on everything that I've already got, and there are a huge number of plugins that I've already got. So people will sometimes even ask me, oh, you've got to come out with something new that I don't have so that I can throw money at you for the updates that I'm getting for free. The other reason is it's that good. It is better than any of the previous type saturation plugins or things that I've done. It's got a different algorithm than anything that I've done. It's using two Mather operations rather than in density. I'm typically doing one. With Drive, there is another more complicated algorithm, but what we will do now is show you what happens when we've got a drum kit. Now the drum kit peaks out more irregularly, so it's more difficult to get that to actually show you something. And what you'll find is that when you kick in PurestDrive, you really don't hear a thing because it's already fairly low down, although there is a slight difference. This algorithm is doing something across the entire level of range. But you're probably not hearing much there. However, when we add 2 dB of gain, now we're starting to hear a certain amount of saturation, a certain amount of overdrive. And as you can see, I just peaked out at +1. This is a soft clip. This is not a hard, rigid clip. It's a soft clip, so it can take a good dB or two maybe off of everything. But it's going to do it very gently and not go for some rigid clip point that's going to sound hard. This doesn't sound hard to the ear. We'll go back to nothing again. And then throw on the clips. And you're hearing a clear increase in upfrontness and definition off of this, even though it is a raw drum recording in which a soft clip isn't going to be that useful to it, but it's taking off just the very tip of it. And lastly, we've got a bass. It's a sort of hard driving John Entwistle kind of bass with a lot of fret buzz and stuff. And with this, and with all of these, I've taken the tracks in the arrange window and maxed them out until they are peaking around 0. See, that's up to 0.2 right there, as you can see. And I'll throw on PurestDrive. With this, you can start to hear a tonal difference even when throwing it on just like that. The bass guitar happens to show that off pretty well. I'll take it back off. And you hear it's a little more empty, it's a little drier. And then you throw it back on. And we've got something of a more upfront tonality to it. And then we can add 4 dB of gain going into the drive. Now this might clip a tiny bit, but it's amazing how much you can get out of PurestDrive with this particular sound. Again, this is 4 dB of boost going into it, and it was already in such a situation that if I turn both of these off, there are moments when we're just about clipping this raw sound. But when we throw PurestDrive on there, we can get a whole 4 dB, and that's a much thicker sound than it was before. So, if we had all of these going on together, it would sound something like this. As you can see, this peaks out the output level, and it will actually overload a tiny bit every now and then. Like, see, it just went over by 1.4 dB. There it's 2.2 dB. Now, we could throw PurestDrive on, and that would surely fix it. I've got a copy right here. And sure enough, it does a wonderful job of tightening up things. But here's what I'm going to do to demonstrate why this is a $50 plugin, even though it has one slider and does nothing but a saturation that you really can't hear. Here's what you can do with something that you really can't hear. We'll turn this off. As you can see, it is doing a nice little clip, and we're getting as many as 3 dB boost over there. We'll run back, and we'll start turning everything on. Got that. And then we'll turn the gain on, 3 dB there, and then we'll turn PurestDrive on. Oh, we got about 0.5 clip there. That's an occasional thing. We could be throwing on something like 80 clip or a simple clipper after this. But look at what normally happens here. Now this is a level of overload that's like French house. You've got the synthetic kick in here, we've got a drum kit, we've got all kinds of stuff, and it's being pushed so hard that it's ridiculously overcranked. In fact, I'll back it off half a dB there, just for laughs there. Look at what it's doing. PurestDrive on, you can hardly hear me over it now. This is a very sort of French housey kind of sound. It's like one of those really tiny little mixing boards that is just driven really hard. Oh, there we suddenly had a very big peak there. There's still a use for things like safety clippers after this. The point being, though, and you know what we'll do? I don't actually need to crank things out that loudly. That is a level of crank that I feel is unnecessary. I don't even like having things be that loud. Point being, we can have the actual channels pushed really hard, and then we can have the output level, and I have that actually at minus 1.2 on the output there. Let's experiment around a little bit with this. I haven't fiddled with this under these circumstances. If I don't have PurestDrive on the output, we're getting good big peaks there. But then if I turn it on, we immediately have it peaking very nicely and cleanly. And again, this is like I said, this sort of French housey kind of sound. It's really big and full, and it's pretty saturated. We can also take off these gains, and this is going to be the maximum pureness of tone. And here, I'm just going to show you what these tracks sound like all together into the mix bus, loud enough that they will clip it. Then I'll turn on PurestDrive on all of those channels and the bus, and you'll hear that it sounds basically exactly the same, but there will be headroom. And it goes kind of like this. And again, that is without the individual tracks are turned up to the point where they're peaking out. And the combination totally is. Then when you start turning on PurestDrive, this is like a really interesting kind of safety clipper. It's a safety clipper that's not really designed for maximum loudness. It's designed for letting stuff sort of sit in the mix in the cleanest imaginable way. Like, the difference between this and the raw tracks is virtually nothing tonally. But it's able to, oh, see, I've got a little bit of clip there. I'll do what I said I would. I'll throw on 80 clip. Now this is what I call a really resilient kind of mix bus. I can set this up and even throw other stuff in there as well. You can throw on all kinds of stuff. Everything you could possibly imagine. Actually, while I'm at it, let me throw PurestDrive on everything. Not that I necessarily need to, because it is sitting there pretty well, but now you hardly need to get stuff louder than this. That's about as thick as you need the mix to get. It's cranking out so hard that, for instance, you can see Vox angle span is just peaking out like crazy over here. Actually, I'm going to be over here. Vox angle span is peaking out like crazy. This is a good, solid, loud, modern type mix. But PurestDrive is $50, and you might think that just buying a plugin that doesn't sound like anything and only distorts about 1, maybe 2 at the max dB is not a worthwhile thing to do. But, well, you just heard what it did. Gain staging is a huge deal, and using something like this ultimate high resolution, ultimate pass through the tonality saturation plugin to put together mixes is a very useful tool, and you can't replicate it with the stock DAW plugins, and you can't replicate it with typical, like, this is what I've been working on for some years, and I'm going in a direction that is not the same direction the rest of the industry is doing. So I don't think you're going to get stuff that sounds like this, or that you can stack up like this and get the same kinds of results. I am more than happy to see people do shootouts and try their best, but PurestDrive is probably going to be the most high-resolution saturation plugin around for a little while. And I hope people like it.